Good evening, this is Ken Spencer. I've been asked to judge your print contest this month. I've been active in photography for over 40 years. I'm primarily an outdoor and landscape photographer. I've always done my own color printing, first in the 70s from 35mm slides and then later from 4x5 negatives and now from digital images. I'm a member of the Fort Worth Camera Club and have served as president 6 times since joining in 1986. I've won Masters Print Photographer of the Year 10 times at Fort Worth and Masters Print of the Year 5 times. My work has been exhibited around the North Texas area. We're going to start with beginner's prints, and the first print is Prague Clarinetist. I scored at 9 points. It's more of a snapshot. I think the photographer could have worked around different angles and different views to improve this image. All the white in the background is a bit distracting. I think you just found this fellow on the street probably, but it doesn't excel past just a snapshot category. The next print is the Narrows, Zion National Park. It scores honorable mention, and it's by Jack Huang. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, and I'm sure I have. The composition here is very nice. You have good detail in the shadows. It only scored 10 points because you just were there at the wrong time of day. A lot of the highlights are burned out. You've done as well good a print as you could make under the circumstances. But there's just too much burned out. If you look down towards the people are, the hard time of day really has affected the quality of this print. Also, the greens have been zoomed up a little bit higher than I might have liked. The next print is Sarah's Falls, and it scores 3rd place and 13 points. It's by Denny Farmer. It's a very nice print. Colors look good. This is a good example of the right light. I wish we'd had this kind of light, and I'm sure the photographer does on the last print taken in Zion. The composition works so well because the waterfall leads your eye a little bit to the right side of the print, but then the stream takes your eye back to the left. It's got good detail in the foreground and background. The photographer slowed the shutter down to give the falls kind of a silky look. It's a very nice print. It scores 13 points in 3rd place. 2nd place is Texas Tuba March by Loretta Griffin. It scores 13 points also. Colors are really good on this. It tells a story. It's a view that we don't see very often, or maybe you've never seen this view. I'm looking in the reflections in the horn to see if I can find a photographer, and I could not. But the composition is great. It's a great eye to see these fellows marching by, and the colors and the exposure is really nice on print. Just overall, really nice print. First place is Yellow Calla Lilies by Nancy Mack. It gets 14 points, and again, 1st place. Great color. It's really, really well printed, and the composition is just super on it. It got 14 points, and it got 14. I would love to get it 15, but it's just floating in a sea of black, and I wish we'd have had a little bit of detail of something in the background. And if we'd had, I would have given an extra point and 15 points. But as it is, it's really a nice use of color. Very attractive image, well printed. That brings us to the intermediate class. We're going to start with a print entitled Seashell, 8 points. If it didn't have the title Seashell, I wouldn't have had a clue what it was. There's so much of it out of focus that it just really hurts it. Also, maybe if you had good focus on it, maybe a vertical would have worked better, as it's drifting off the edges of the paper, both top and bottom. So it doesn't have a whole lot going for it, and it's hanging in a black space. So that one needs quite a bit of work, and it scored 8 points. The next print is titled Rosie and Rough. It also scores 8 points, and it's such a cute little girl, and a nice portrait of the girl and the dog. It looks more like a candid shot instead of posed, and that's really a good thing. It helps the print. It's just printed so dark. Her face is so dark, so it needs to be printed lighter, more exposure on the file. Then, if the file is underexposed, which I don't think it is, because everything looks pretty good. It doesn't look like they're stretching the exposure on it. It just needs to be printed brighter, and I think that would have helped it. But other than that, I really like it. It could have scored much higher. I'd print that again, work on it a little bit, maybe do a little burning and brighten the girl's face a bit. Next print is Smile for Me, 9 points. Attractive looking fellow. It bothered me a lot that there were little white specks all over his hair and on his shirt collar, almost like he'd been out in the snow or something. And I'm not sure what that is, but it's a little distracting, and it could have been easily removed in Photoshop. So that's why I only scored it 9 points. The next print is Living Legend. I like trains. I have a lot of photographs of trains I've taken myself, and this composition on this one is nice. The reason it just got 10 points is you ran the contrast up too high on it. I think the color saturation is probably okay. It may be a little high too, but the contrast, the high contrast, is what really hurt this image, and I wanted it to succeed. So I would reprint this, lower the contrast down a little bit, and then look at the color on it and see if it's oversaturated a bit. And I think you can make a much better print, and I think it'd be worth reprinting because the composition is really nice. Next is Evening on South Padre. This probably looks a little flat to you unless you're looking at it under a really strong light. And it is a bit flat, but it does look better under a really strong light. At first you think, well, there's no good whites, but there are. If you look at these little tiny flowers, they're truly white. And there are some blacks that are approaching black. It's kind of tricky to print a landscape on a matte paper. I think if this were mine, I would probably reprint it on maybe a satin or a luster paper. I might increase the contrast just a little, and maybe the exposure just a little too. The composition is nice. The clouds add to it and has a nice foreground, and the little flowers draw your attention. But I think a reprint job on this I think it can be improved. By the way, Evening on South Padre got 11 points, and honorable mention if I didn't mention that before. The next print is Glistening Moss, 3rd place and 13 points. This has a lot of bright areas in it, but it's okay. It gives you a misty, kind of eerie feeling of being standing or losing yourself in the swamp. It's really nice. The composition is nice. It's fairly sharp and has a great feel to it. And see, this is printed on luster paper, and luster or satin paper, and I think the previous print at South Padre would have benefited from that also. Here the contrast is good, the blacks are pretty good, and the whites are pretty good, so it's a nice print. By the way, I failed to mention that Evening on South Padre was Valerie Johnson. Glistening Moss was by Janet Davenport. And the 2nd place print, Georgetown Barn, is by Joyce Magnum. And Georgetown Barn scores 14 points in 2nd place. It's a high key print, and I first looked at this, I'm not used to seeing high-key landscapes or architectural shots, as you might this morning go into either category. And I wasn't wild about it at first, but the more I looked at it, the more I liked it. And I think giving it a high-key effect elevated the print from kind of a mundane subject and a mundane point of view to a subject that is very attractive and can be looked at or hung on the wall for a long period of time. So I really like it, and I scored it 14 points in second place. First place and 15 points is Precious Tibetan Llama by Sherry Jaco. By the way, Georgetown Barn was by Joyce Magnum. Precious Tibetan Monk by Sherry Jaco scores 15 points in first place. It is, first thing that attracted me to it is the exposure is right on the money. The colors are just very, very good, and it's sharp as a tack. And so with decent composition, good colors, and a very sharp image, well composed, that's worth 15 points every time. And so that's why this one got 15 points in first place. We're moving on to the advanced group. And the first print is black on red. And I gave it 8 points for a number of reasons. First of all, it's floating in a sea of black, but it's off color. The girl's skin is blue, or has a bluish cast to it, and her pose looks uncomfortable. So for those reasons, I gave it 8 points, but the number one reason was to me, it's off color. And you can tell that by looking at the skin tones on the girl. Next print is White Rock Bride. I scored it 9 points. I'm not sure why this bride is out here late in the evening and strobed. Her pose is fairly nice, but I think the use of flash out here in the dark landscape just kind of strange to me. And also, I would expect her gown to be white. Maybe it's not, but it's not here in the photograph. So I think it was the use of flash in the dark landscape and the gown not being white. I'm assuming her veil would also be white. Scored it down to 9 points. Next is Low Tide at Vanuatu. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that properly, but it scored honorable mention and 10 points. It's a little low on impact, but the composition is okay. The tree branches up in the upper right and the immediate foreground tend to add depth to the picture. As seascapes go, this one's just kind of average. But the reason I didn't score it more than 10 is it's not sharp. This looks like it was a handheld image, and a tripod would have helped you sharpen this up, because I don't think it's depth of field. Everything is pretty much soft everywhere you look. And when you're taking a seascape or a landscape, you've got all the time in the world to use a tripod, and that always helps. And by the way, the Low Tide at Vanuatu is by Jerry Schlesinger. Next print is Arch Mesa Canyonlands National Park, and it is by Linfen Wang. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that, but hope you get my drift. Arch Mesa Canyonlands National Park gets third place and 13 points. There's a lot of rock right in your face here. down at the bottom of the print and also at the top. But when you get between those rocks, it leads your eye off down through the canyon where there's pretty good color and pretty good detail. I would have scored this another point had it been sharper. Again, a print this size should be razor sharp, and it's not quite there. But still, the composition was very nice and color was good on it. Second place is Morning on the Lake by Jim Walsh. Great composition. It's just being there at the right time. The fog on the water, the people over there at the little peninsula, all add impact to it. Just beautifully composed and nicely printed. My only complaint about it, and this may be the way it was, and I'm sure it is, but I believe you could help it by cranking up the red saturation just a little bit. Maybe not in the reflections, but in the sky. It's a little pastel, and that may be the way it was, but even if it was, we could cheat just a little bit and make that red come out just a little bit more. As it is, super print. It's what's called being there at the right time, and so it scores second place and 14 points. First place is East Side Village Window. 15 points. It's by Carol Barlow. Impact. This has impact. The color is just excellent on it. The composition is great, and it's sharp. It's sharp as it can be. So with good composition, good color, good saturation, and sharp, how can it not get 15 points? This brings us to the master's class prints. And the first print is called Relic. Relic needs a lot of contrast added to it. This may be the look you're going for. Kind of a soft pastel kind of look. I see the colors on the flag are still there, but very, very weak. And if this is the look you're going for, that's fine. I didn't quite hit with me, and I would have increased the contrast on it quite a bit. And again, printing landscapes and architectural shots on matte paper can be risky. It'll eat your contrast up pretty quick if you're not careful. The next print is Driftwood Tangle. It scores 9 points. It's good composition, nice clouds. I think it's printed a little bit dark. It's pretty contrasty too. And of course, it looks like it was taken at a bad time of day. And chances are, if you printed a little lighter, you'd be losing some detail in the highlights. I'm not sure about that, but as it is now, it's good composition. It's just a bad time of day, and you did probably as good as you could get to handle the harsh light. Still, I think it needs to be printed a little bit lighter with a little less contrast. Might help it also. A Busy Day in Venice. 9 points. It's an interesting scene, more in the snapshot category than the salon print category, I think. Again, on print on matte paper, and that tends to desaturate the color somewhat. But it's a pretty nice composition, and the boat in the foreground does add a little bit of depth to it. 9 points. The next print is Dallas Skyline. Boy, the colors in the reflections are really nice. There's an awful lot of black cutting right through the middle of the picture, which you had no control over whatsoever. It doesn't have, you will see when we get on to the winners, the difference, but it just doesn't have that sharpness that I think it could have. And there could be a number of reasons for that. I'm sure you had to use a tripod here for a long enough exposure. But there are several ways you can increase your sharpness, even with a tripod, by doing things like a mirror lockup, shutter release, a number of things to help with sharpness. It's not soft, it's just not as sharp as I wished it was. And I suspect it's printed very, very nicely, about right, but I suspect that the original file may be a little bit overexposed. So that's why I scored it 10 points. Next print is entitled Power Girl. I gave it 10 points. And that's going to stir some controversy, I'm sure. If it is put together as a composite, which it must be, it's an excellent job. What puzzles me about it, and why I'm wondering, is this really photography or not? If you look at the girl, I don't think any women I ever saw look like that. She looks like the cover of a Marvel Comics. And so it makes me wonder where the photographer got the image of the girl. All the rest of it, I guess I could see. You could have captured the lightning, and you could have been where there was a fire and all that. So is this photography? Is this a composition? Or is this a copy of a poster or something that was found? I don't think the girl is real. She had to be animated in some way. So I'm puzzled about it, and because I am, I only gave it 10 points. I may be wrong, and if I am, I certainly apologize, but that's what I thought about it. Next print is titled Skeletal Light. 11 points. Wow, I can't. It's hard to get your eye past all the bars of light to get to the door, and then you say, well, what's the subject? Is it the door? And because I can't get past all this light, it's neat to see that, and a neat find. And any of us that were there would have photographed this, I'm sure, just because it's so unusual. I gave it 11 points. Next is fireworks. Something we've seen, like hot air balloons, we've seen them over and over and over. But again, this is a nice one. The fireworks are right in the right spot. You got a little reflections in the cars down below, and you can even see there's a flame where, I'm assuming, where they were blasting the fireworks from. So composition is nice. The sky is not black, it's kind of dark blue. You can see the puffs of powder, explosions in the sky. So it's really a nice print, and I gave it 12 points. Next print is Rainbow Falls, 12 points. Has a good foreground, good background. He slowed the shutter down to make the falls look kind of misty. The colors are good. It's got everything going for it. It's an image that we've all seen a lot, but it's still a good print, and it gets 12 points. Next is Oxerera River, Iceland. That's what my list says. On the back of the print, it says Cascade Oxerfoss River, Iceland. It also scores 12 points. Has a good foreground, a good sharp foreground, which gives it depth. And your eye goes close to the upper left of the image and picks up the river. which runs you toward the right and then turns you back to the left and out the lower left corner. Really nice composition. Everything about it looks really nice. And slung the shutter down makes a little rivulets in the water look quite nice. Color balance is good. It's got a few clouds, not a blank sky. Although it was, you were fortunate that it has a nice sky. It looked like a bright overcast, which we all hope for, but seldom find. So it's a really nice print, and 12 points. Next print is entitled Moab Evening. There's an awful lot of light tan rocks here in the foreground. But once you get past those, they're kind of blocking your view. But once you get past those, and you see the sun setting on the rocks in the background, and the fact that they're really red, draws your attention and brings your eye through those rocks and back to the back, and makes you want to go back there and see what all's going on. It's a good composition, good sharp foreground, and I don't know if the moon was there or not, or if you added it, but it definitely adds a real good element to the print. I give it 13 points. Next is Peacock. And Peacock gets 13 points and an honorable mention. And the Peacock is by Larry Peterborg. It's sharp. The colors are just really nice. You can see every feather on the bird. It's well composed. I can't fault it in any way, and I don't know how you would improve it. So I gave it honorable mention and 13 points. It got 13 in honorable mention because there are some with a little more impact. But nice job, nice print. Next is Marines Escort, Fair Park, Dallas. This thing is sharp. The colors work so well. I mean, the color balance on it appears to me to just be about perfect. The exposure is perfect on the print, and I'm sure was perfect on the file. And that green stands out in that sea of red just tremendously. And then your eye goes right to the lady's face, which is well lit, a little bright, where it should be. And that draws your eye to her. And I don't know whether the photographer made her face just a little brighter or not, but if he did, it sure worked, because everything about this print is just a super, super nice print. Good color, good sharpness, good composition. Very nice. And it is by Jose Ortiz. Third place, The White House at Canyon de Chelly, is by Dennis Ritchie. Well, Dennis knows how to take a picture, and this one is really good. From where you may be setting, if you don't have a good light on this, it may look a little flat, but put it under good light, and it's not flat at all. It's very well exposed and well printed. Again, this is on matte paper, and Dennis had enough contrast and a good enough file that would carry out on this matte paper. I wouldn't have thought of printing this on matte paper, but he did, and it made a very nice print indeed. So he got third place and 14 points. 14 points in third place for White House at Canyon de Chelly. Second place with 14 points is Orange Mountain Spring by Ron Hasty. Great. It's not easy to light these things and make them look like you haven't lit them. Lit, is that a good word? Has it look like you put the light on it. And here he did a great job. If you look close, you can even see the dead trees on either side of this. and of course the stars, and you can even see the steam rising from the spring, and having all the stars in there certainly helps. It's not an easy photograph to take, and with the stars and lighting this so it looks natural, he did a great job. 14 points and second place. And first place then is Dallas Nightscape. That's by Linda Grigsby. It's not only first place, it's also best in show. And it gets 15 points. And this is what I was talking about with the earlier cityscape having punch. And this one does. The composition is great. It's sharp as a tack. The file, I'm sure when they got the file, it was just exactly what they wanted. They didn't have to. I'm guessing they did not have to manipulate the file any to get this print, and it just has punch and impact. I would, if I was a photographer here, I would hang this in my home, and I might make even a better print, a bigger print of it, because I think it would stand up. So everything about this print's just beautiful. 15 points. Best in show. So that concludes the judging of the prints. Thanks for asking me. I hope I didn't step on too many toes tonight. And I appreciate your work. For some of you beginners especially, I would recommend that the prints, if you had a print that just wasn't real sharp, you might consider using that tripod next time. Using a shutter release, use mirror lockup if you've got it, and anything you can do to improve your sharpness, especially if you're taking a landscape or a cityscape or an architectural shot where you have time to set up your tripod and get a sharper print as you can. Thanks much. Good evening.